Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science. Welcome to Chai with World's Smartest Founders, CTDS.show. In this episode, I got to interview the CEO and founder of Numerai, the world's last hedge fund. If you've ever been on the platform, or if you haven't, please check it out. It's one of the most unique, most fascinating companies, data science tournament places, also hedge fund. If all of this sounds exciting to you, that's what Numerai is about. It's a hedge fund where they put out their data sets for competitors, essentially think a competitions place for data scientists, for just for the finance world. I got to talk to Richard about his journey and how this idea of creating this company came about. What is it exactly? How does the platform work for people like me who haven't ever competed on there? And how can you get started? How can you compete on the financial market through Numerai? There are 4 phases in their master plan, and we discussed about that and all things that are happening in their amazing world, in their amazing community. They've recently put out signals, which also you can find a link in the show notes too. We also discuss about that. Now, without standing between you and the interview, here's my conversation with Richard Craib, CEO and founder of Numerai. Please enjoy the show. I'm very excited and honored to be talking to Richard Craib on the call. Richard, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
So I want to start by talking about your journey into the world of trading. I heard on a podcast interview that you got your first stock at the age of 8, started trading at the age of 15. Was that when you got interested in the world of finance and trading?
Yeah, I got my first stock. My dad gave me stocks when I was 8, and I started trading options when I was 15. And it was really just kind of bad trading, though. I mean, it was just getting my first impressions of the market. I also bought into some IPOs that did well, and started a number of companies as a teenager. And then all of this ends up leading into Numerai a few years ago.
One of these companies that I heard about was WhatsApp replica before the iPhone had happened. Could you talk about that? Because I think you were always interested in this world of creating something of your own and finance. So just trying to connect the dots.
Yeah, I started. I was interested in phones at a time. I mean, it was pretty obvious that phones were going to be a big deal when you had internet on the phone, and there used to be something called WAP, like in 2005 or 4, where there was sort of like these fake baby internet that you could make websites for, that was sort of different on all phones. But there was this thing called J2ME, which was a Java that was for phones. And I thought if you could make an application that could do just messaging on the phone through the internet instead of SMS, then people would use that. So that was kind of like the idea for almost like a WhatsApp. But it was long before the iPhone, and it was too early in a lot of ways. Like there was no way to get this app onto lots of different phones. Even though it was all Java, it was supposed to be standard. Many phones didn't have like the right buttons, so it ended up being kind of like a mess, and very hard to make it work. But we did get quite a few users, but ended up not really working. And then I went to college.
Do you have any interesting memories through just at such a young age, getting into the world of finance, starting your own different ventures? Any good memories from the early days?
No, I think I was like quite stressed. Like I really wanted to. I really enjoyed business and starting companies, and I looked up to the American entrepreneurs and American companies. Um, and I, yeah, it was stressful because it was like you had a lot to learn. I mean, like even just interacting with people and all the different kinds of roles you have to do, like you in the same day, you can simultaneously like lose a big customer and lose a great employee and lose your funding or something like that. So there's a lot that can go wrong. So I don't recommend doing a startup to any young person. If unless it's like you really can't not do it, like it's something inside you that you really want to do it, because it's not that fun, and it's not even that good for you, like for learning. I mean, it's like if you get good at entrepreneurial like hustle, when you're young, you might not get good at software engineering or get good at mathematics or get good at things that are actually hard skills. So yeah, I would discourage people from it if yeah.
Interesting. At what point did you decide to take up finance as a career? Because afterwards you went to work as a quant, and I want this to roll off my tongue, like Mr. Wonderful says in Shark Tank. You were working at a company where you were managing $15 billion. I think the hedge fund was managing $15 billion. So when did you decide to pursue that as a career?
Well, nearly all hedge funds have billions of dollars, so it's nothing, that special to be in a fund that has
My
lots of.
only exposure is the Billions TV show, where I hope you make a cameo very soon. You haven't yet, but
Yeah, I should do a cameo. That would be cool. Yeah, so I knew I wanted to do finance. I was always doing finance internships, and a lot of why I was studying economics and mathematics was to go into finance. Um, but quant is interesting. Like it's very difficult to do well in the market, and that's the problem you face instantly. And if you've already done machine learning, you'll find that on most data sets, it's incredibly easy to do well. If you have a data set of dogs and cats and you train a neural net on it, you can detect them really well, like 95% accurate or something. And then in finance, somehow it doesn't work. And it's like, why isn't it working in this domain? What's so different about this data? And I spend a lot of time on that, working alone on that problem in this fund, and eventually found a few things that worked quite well, that they end up turning into a new fund inside of the firm, and the performance was very good. But at that time, I was also curious about other things happening in technology, like blockchain and machine learning. Playing in machine learning competitions on Kaggle. So started having the idea for Numerai in my last year there.
I saw you had silver medal in a competition quite a few years ago. I hope that was your profile.
Yeah, that could be mine. I think I came something like top 11%. There was like a prize for being in the top 10%, but there was like a badge, but I only got to like top 11 or something. But I was working on that with a friend who was much better at neural nets than me, and it was an image classification problem. So he did a lot of the work, and I did some ensembling, trying to turn all his models into one model. So that's also interesting.
Got it. So connecting the dots now, there's the world of data science, there's a world of hedge funds, there's a startup world. These three don't overlap so much. How did you come up with the idea of founding Numerai? And you put out the master plan. Where are you in the journey?
Yeah, I I wanted to be an entrepreneur and involved in finance. So it was really kind of interesting that blockchain, almost all blockchain startups are something to do with finance. And then even this sort of fintech term came out around the time I was starting Numerai and just before. So suddenly a lot of the companies that were being started were to do with finance, whereas in the past, a company like Apple or Microsoft or Amazon has little to do with finance. So it was quite cool that these things started up. And I remember reading the Ethereum white paper, and they were talking about options in the white paper of Ethereum, and I was like, oh wow, like there's some people involved in technology who are also involved in finance. But I wanted to put all the ideas together in one company because it felt like I needed to do something that would be the last company I do. Kind of, I'd done so many little startups where I was half doing it. I was like, in college, but I had a startup, or I had two startups at the same time, and and it was just stupid. And with Numerai, I just wanted to kind of start with a clean slate and make it something that had a really big vision and a very long-term plan. And that is what the master plan is. It's very simple. All we are doing is monopolizing intelligence, getting really smart people to come to Numerai, monopolizing data so that they have all the data to work with, monopolizing money, meaning we're going to raise a lot of money into our hedge fund. And number 4 is decentralize the monopoly. There would be no reason why it couldn't be governed by the token holders or something like that in the future. And at the moment, we've done a good job on the monopolized intelligence thing. I mean, we don't have everybody in the world signed up to Numerai, but we definitely have a good chunk of the good data scientists out there. We have a good chunk of the Kaggle users who've also signed up to Numerai, and the Kaggle grandmasters and things like that. And more recently, we've been adding new data sets and new ways to contribute your own data. But we aren't very far on step 3 and step 4, which will take a number of years to do.
Starting with phase 1, the first stage, how do you define Numerai? It's also a hedge fund. It's also Kaggle for competitions. What's going on there?
Well, the thing about Numerai is we were the first hedge fund to give out our data and tell the world, you can model our data. Anyone can come and contribute some intelligence based on the data we've given. And why would you do that? Well, it's great to get talented people around the world working together on one problem, and adding lots of models together tends to be a very good idea for improving your performance, especially in finance, because it increases your mean and lowers your standard deviation. So that was the reason, but the risk is why no other hedge funds do this is because if you give away your data, other people can steal it. Not steal it, but run off with it and start their own hedge fund. And
is it similar to Billions, where they literally make phone calls, pay millions of dollars just to get some data, some edge over the competitors? Is that how it is?
Well, Billions definitely had sort of some insider trading slant. So they were doing things like finding out specific things about specific companies and making big illegal bets on them. But everything in Numerai is quant. So, but yeah, the industry is all about having some kind of edge, and the one edge you could have is you have data that no one else has, and another edge is you can have models that no one else has, or ways of processing the data that no one else has. And I think for Numerai, because we have so many data scientists submitting models to us, we definitely have a way of processing models and data better than anyone, and combining them into one hedge fund. So that's a big differentiator for us.
There's also aspect of skin in the game for competitors. Can you elaborate on that? And how are you incentivizing everyone to compete each week?
Yeah. So the first thing Numerai did, like I said, was give away this free data sets to anyone to use. But what happens is people might do something bad, like make a bunch of models that and hope that hope that one of the models does well just randomly.
Yes.
But that is not what we want, right? Like we don't want people to try to get lucky. And even on Kaggle, that does kind of happen. Like you might try a few models at once and just hope that one of them does well. But that's not what you're really looking for. You're looking for the one that you really think will be the best. And so I thought about, how does the stock market itself solve this problem? Like you don't want anyone who thinks Snapchat should be twice as valuable to be able to move the price twice as much. The only way you can move the price in the market is by buying a lot of Snapchat yourself and thereby pushing the order book up and the price up. And the same with Numerai. If you really believe in your model, we created a cryptocurrency called Numerai. And with Numerai, you can stake your model and say, I believe in the model. And here's 100 NMRs to prove that I believe that my model is going to work on the future data. And that is a big important function that we do, is like figure out, we can't really trade anyone's model unless we believe that they believe in their models. And the only reason they would stake on them is if they did believe in them.
As you know, it's all, you already know this, but it's one of the most unique and fascinating setups. There's a question by their username on Twitter is DataSci. What percentage of weekly stake is paid back to stakees? How easy it is to turn the crypto into cash? Are there any exchange costs, taxes involved? Do you know if people often do this, or are they always staked into it?
Yeah, so at first, we made this cryptocurrency and it wasn't on any exchanges or anything, but now it is on Coinbase and Binance and has a lot of volume on them, and also on Uniswap. So people typically earn it and sell some of it, or restake their earnings to earn more. There are, if you make earnings in most countries, you have to pay tax, but I don't want to speak to that. There's different policies, but in the US, all of our users pay tax on their earnings.
Okay. Kaggle definitely is one of the most richest in terms of competitors, and the community always surprises the people who set up the competitions. Have you ever been surprised by the rich quality of predictions coming in, or did you always expect it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that inspired me. I thought it was amazing that, nearly every time a company did a competition, they would be surprised how well the Kaggle competition, how well the Kaggle community would perform. And I have been surprised. I mean, we created a very good model on our own data and gave it out and said, this is kind of the best we can do right now. And it was an XGBoost model, and it had a lot of parameter search, and it was like a good. And then people initially didn't make better models than that, but now the models are way better than that. And on an individual basis, like you can be better than that model. And on the meta model basis, it's even better. Like if you add everyone together, that is so much better than what a basic model would do. So that's the point of Numerai, is that the models put together is much better than any model we can build internally. Therefore, we should, use these models from the community instead of building them ourselves.
To the audience who hasn't, anyone from the audience who hasn't read any of your blog posts, please pause the interview right now, head over to Medium, read each and every one of them. In the one where you talk about meta model, you've mentioned we are building the world's largest ensemble of stock market ML models. So far, at the time of writing, you had 190,000 of these models.
Yeah, we've had that. Yeah, that's referring to the number of submissions that users have made. So what might happen is a user could submit a model and then not change their model, and they also submitting the number of predictions they're submitting on a test set and a live set. But yeah, over the years, we've had millions of uploads of submissions. And it's been, much more than I thought we could. I mean, like if you look at some of the most active Kaggle competitions ever, we have we're competitive with them and sometimes have more submissions than them. And in Numerai, you have to stake, so that's quite a big barrier. And we still, even though we ask for stakes, we still have more than 1,000 models staking per week, and they're staking over $4 million put together. So they really believe in their models, and it's great to see how much that's grown, because when we started with NMR, it didn't have any price because it wasn't on any exchanges. We didn't know what would happen. We gave it away for free. And now it's gone from something like $30,000 of stakes 18 months ago to $4 million.
And if this sounds ridiculous to anyone, if you follow Richard on Twitter, you'll constantly get a mind-blowing update. Every few months, I was just scrolling through your Twitter feed for my research, and it all was very, very surprising. And looking back at it historically. So what happens once and there's a codependency, you just get the predictions, the users don't get the data, they get the anonymized data. Once you have the predictions, what happens? What's the secret sauce? If you could share what's happening inside of the meta model that's being created.
Yeah, there's an interesting paper. I can't remember exactly its name, but it talks about the sort of surprising effectiveness of averaging in finance, and simple averaging. So if you have lots of models, for some reason, it's hard to beat 1/n averaging, just the simple average of the models. And the sort of like, why is that? You might say, well, why don't you just put a lot of money on the models that have performed well lately? And then for some reason, that's actually, those models are often the ones that are just about to mean revert and do badly. So maybe you don't want to put, but you don't want to put nothing on them, because things could keep going the way they have been going. So there is something special about finance where naive averaging is very good. And but obviously, I thought we could do a lot better than that. Could we make a machine learning model that sits on top of all the models that combines them together? And we tried for kind of years to do that well, but often really struggled to beat 1/n on live data.
Interesting.
But the one thing that does beat it on live data is stake weighted average. So you just take the user's stake, and if they're 5% of the stake, they've put, let's say they've 10% of the stake, they put $400,000 down. You should give them a 10% weight, because they've really thought about their model. Otherwise, they wouldn't be risking so much. So you might want to weight it that way, and that tends to beat naive averaging. But that's, again, not a machine learning algorithm. It's not a special model. It's just taking the stakes and trusting them, and trusting that the users are good and know how to assess how much to stake, and just basically trusting them to build the meta model with their stakes. So that's been really interesting to watch, because I thought we could do better than averaging, and averaging is very good, but we could still do better. But it's difficult, because there's not that much data in the stock market. So if you ever upweight something, you say, let's use this a lot more than that, you're always going to be like, how much do we really know? Do we know enough? Do we have enough? And usually you don't. So you want to use everything.
So you mentioned data. The next step in your master plan is monopolizing data. You just Signals just went out of beta into public. Can you talk about that? And what's the vision there? What's going to happen? Why will people upload their data to Numerai? What's the incentive for people uploading their data?
Yeah, so Signals lets you upload predictions on stocks or signals on stocks that are from data you've got somehow yourself, whereas Numerai is for data that we give out. So on signals, if you have some quant model that you've built yourself that does think Google's better than Apple and Microsoft's better than all of them or something, you can upload that directly to us. And we have no idea what data you used to make it, except that we know it's quant style data because you're making the signal over 5,000 stocks. But ultimately, the reason for that is we don't want our users to be constrained by the data we give out. There is going to be some kind of ceiling of how well you can do with just numerized data. So we can break that ceiling by saying, actually, you can also bring your own data. And you might say, yeah, the first question is, why would anyone give you their signal? If it were good, why would they give it to you? And the reason is, it's actually very hard to start a hedge fund, and most signals are not actually profitable. So you might have a signal that makes 6% a year before costs, and then after costs, it's actually only 1% a year. And so that wouldn't be a good hedge fund. And you would never be able to raise money for that signal. And you wouldn't want to trade it because it's not enough alpha to cover costs. But it's still worth something to us because we already cover our costs, let's say, with our other strategies. And your extra 7% a year strategy, pre-costs, is going to help us without us kind of paying those costs, because in some ways we've already paid them. So that's a special property of stock market signals, where it might actually be worthless to you, but very valuable to a bigger fund. And therefore, you'd much rather rent it to us than trade it yourself. But we don't even stop there. You're welcome to trade it yourself and give it to us. Do whatever you want to do. But ultimately, we will reward you for how good your signal is compared to all the other signals we already have. And that's also a surprise to some people because we don't want to pay for, oh, you found that momentum is correlated with stock returns. Like everybody knows that. And we don't want you to upload a basic momentum signal. So you get paid for originality more than just raw returns correlation.
So how do you trust someone who's just sending over a signal? How can we trust them?
We don't trust them. We trust their stakes. So we ask you to stake again. And it works similar to Numerai. You have to put up a stake if you ever want to earn money. So you're only going to put up a stake if you think your signal really is original and valuable to us. And that same staking mechanic is working well on signals already. Already you can see, okay, well, if this guy's risking $3,000 on his signal, maybe we should use it in the meta model and use it to make better trades.
Okay. Zooming out, looking at Numerai as a company, it's your vision. You the founder. What's your role in a day-to-day on, let's say, on a non-pandemic version of the world? What's happening in the company side of things? Because I also know it's a very small team compared to a community that's being hosted. So what happens behind the scenes?
It is very small. It is too small in some ways. I mean, we need more people, and we are hiring some new people. But it's also very nice if you have an R&D kind of company, where you're doing a kind of 0 to 1 thing, and it's either going to work really well or just really not work at all. Then you need to have a very creative, fast-moving environment to have a lot of experiments and change and things like that. So that's always easier to do with fewer people. And I think many startups are realizing now, maybe like they wish they were smaller. Why did they ever need 50 people before they had built the product? And I'm very inspired by stories of small groups of people doing amazing things. One such story, I know that I know one of the engineers who was behind the Tesla neural engine chips, the special chips that they made. And there were like 11 people on that team, and one of them was a lawyer. So there were only 10 engineers, and that made me think, okay, well, you know what? We probably don't need more than 10 people for a while. Um, and so that's about where we are, and we've always been about that. And many times in the company, yeah, we've had like very few people, but they've all had a lot of responsibility. So it makes for interesting work environments. It also, it can be bad. Like that's how you can burn people out if they're the only person in charge of something. Um, but it's been good for us, I think, because of the fact that there's so much research and creativity and like upheaval. Like we once changed our whole data set, which meant every single model that was ever built before stopped working.
Hmm.
And every one of our users had to come back and look at the new data. And this was a big like change. And it's the kind of thing like if we didn't do, we would not be around today. So you have to do a few of these big bets and show that you're going in the right direction of solving this very difficult problem where thousands of other people have already tried, to model the stock market.
There's also an agility factor. Many companies, like you mentioned, wish they were smaller. Many also wish they functioned like a startup where people had more responsibility. So that's also a thing that many companies miss out on.
Yeah, you ask some of the best early employees of companies. One of my friends works at a big startup. He used to work at a big startup, Coinbase, actually, and well, maybe I don't want to be mean to Coinbase, but anyway, I'll say this: it's a very good company, but they, he said like he was like 3.5 years into being there, and said one of the reasons I quit is because he was meeting too many people who were interviewing there who weren't trying to like make the bank of the future.
Hmm.
Um, they were trying to they were like choosing between Dropbox, Airbnb, and Coinbase. That like they're all completely different companies doing completely different things, but to them they were like just trying to join a startup with some kind of brand and credibility. And I think that's a horrible place to be for some startups when it's too early for you to just hire a bunch of people who barely want to even be there. You need to have much more kind of invigorated, creative, interesting people in your early phase, I think.
That's a great insight. So what is your role on a non-pandemic version of the world? What does a day in your life look like at Numerai?
So I used to right now we have a great CTO, Anson, who manages the engineering team, which is the tournament, the website, signals, Numerai, everything to do with API. And then we have the research team, which is thinking about the meta model or new data sets, or how's the best way to integrate new signals. And that team I'm kind of running. So I try to do a lot of on research, and I still do some coding and coming up with basic ideas. None of my ideas are ever none of my code is ever committed because it's not very good. But some of my ideas make it to the end and get implemented. So I try to think a lot about the problem of this kind of data and try to have some creative ideas and then prototype them and then hope that they work in real life.
Okay. You mentioned tournaments. Do you have any interesting lessons that Numerai has learned through the tournaments? And one of the points that I want to just highlight that again I learned was throughout the pandemic world, I think some hedge funds might not have done so well. Again, I'm an outsider, but Numerai was always growing. The community stakes were also growing, and the hedge fund was doing quite well, as I understood from your tweet.
Yeah, well, it has been very bad. I mean, it was already very bad, and then it got much worse. So pretty much since 2015, A lot of hedge funds have struggled, especially ones like AQR that are exposed to factor bets. So if your whole hedge fund idea is like, let's buy cheap stocks according to PE ratios, then those kinds of funds did extremely badly. And it felt like it just kept getting worse for them since then. So they've really struggled. But then even other things, other funds that use machine learning have done badly. There's a fund in the Bay Area called Volion, which was reported that they were down 9% or something, which is a lot for them. They run a very low risk strategy that's not really supposed to do that. And the reason for that is these huge moves in the factors and dislocations in the market. Normally, you don't have like the tech companies like having this drastic outperformance over the other companies, and that these wild swings have been very bad, and they've been much worse than the financial crisis. That's what's also, although to a normal person who's has a 401k retirement account, their stocks are up or flat at least. But if you're a hedge fund, you're not really exposed to the market. You're exposed to the volatility in some way and the factors in the market. So the hedge funds are being like ripped apart, even though the market hasn't been too bad if you sort of didn't sell. So it's quite bad out there, and it's been good to have some, first of all, I think Numerai growing in the pandemic. In some way, it's like we were already remote, right? Like all of our users were already working remotely, and now other hedge funds are kind of being forced to figure that out. But we have a whole system for onboarding new people to work on our data sets and give us signals. So it's been quite a good year for us in a lot of ways, and to see the stakes go up and the usage go up is very encouraging.
It's been a very short journey, if I may, just a few years, but Numerai has done so much. Any favorite moments from the community, from the team, best moments, worst moments, anything that comes to your mind?
One thing we did before the release of Numerai, we had a goat sacrifice in the office. Hear me out. It was a stuffed toy goat, but and there was fake blood. But I came back from New York, and I just saw this what looked like a dead animal in the office, and it was the engineer who built Numerai decided, we needed to have a sacrifice to the crypto gods. To make sure that the code was had no bugs, and it seemed to work, the sacrifice. But that was pretty weird. But I like that. I haven't been as surprised by an employee's autonomous action, because no one told him to do that, and he just thought it was a good idea.
That's the secret. What's next in your journey? Do you have any? Will you continue on the master plan? Any things on the horizon that you could talk about?
Yeah, I'm very excited about Signals. We only just launched it. It's really been a long time in the making. Like the subtle things we've decided to do with it make it very different and way better than anything that's been attempted before, like a Quantopian. And I think it's going to really help us. But we are still early, and I think we're focused this quarter a lot on hiring, on improving core Numerai. I think a lot of the Numerai users don't like how many ideas I have. I'm like making signals, making erasure, making the token, and not polishing the core product. And there's a lot of polish that we're doing this quarter on that. But ultimately, we're getting close to like step 3 of the plan, which is the monopolize money part. And we've had a small fund up until now. It's mainly my money. and some other hedge fund investors. But I think we're getting to the point where it's it's kind of stabilized and done pretty well relative to the peers.
When you reach stage 4, which hypercar will you buy?
What
hypercar are you planning to buy? There's this image in my mind that I can't take off. Every hedge fund manager has to have a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. Which one are you buying?
I am definitely getting the Cybertruck.
You've already ordered that though, right?
Yeah, but that would probably be the only car that would suit Numerai, I think. Lambo would be weird.
Okay. So as a fun segment, I had planned out doing a little explain the tweet. If that's okay with you, I would just like to pull out a few tweets of yours, dive into them.
Okay, cool.
So there's this one: imagine looking at the internet and thinking, yeah, we got everything right already. Numerai.
Yeah, I remember that. I think what is very interesting to me is basically how Numerai is a website that could not work with Web 2, right? It could not work without staking. It just truly, there would be no way to make it work without people being able to put something at stake, because that allows us to trust their signal and avoid this Sybil attack problem. And the whole internet is kind of designed in a way that it's all about the Web 2 stuff still. And it's like, this is like, so you have things like spam on Twitter, spam in your email, spam everywhere. And like people have just sort of like cobbled together like rough approximations of solutions for those problems. But if you had staking everywhere, it feels like that would just all get better. And I hope that there is more staking, because staking is kind of nice. It's like a middle ground. Like some people say it's Numerai is pay to play, because you have to get this token and stake it to, but it's not really pay to play, because we do not get the money you stake. You can stake it and then unstake it, and you have all your money back. We are not earning any money from your stakes. We're giving it straight back to you. The only way you can lose money is if it gets burnt, in which case neither you nor I get it. And so I have this thing that I think it's great that the internet started off free, and the friction of free is very low, and the friction of payment is like horrible. But what about staking? It's like not really a payment, but it is still a bit of friction. And the internet would be better if it became more expensive in that way. You could stake more things.
Okay. This also allows me to transition into the next one. Farming is more advanced than banking.
Did I say that?
You did.
Wow. That feels true. That's amazing. I don't know. I probably heard someone say that and wrote that, but I think that's, banking is pretty bad. There's no technology in it. It's so bad you can make it all, work on a blockchain. Like that's how low tech it is. So farming, much harder.
Okay. There are two more that I found interesting. You'll put hedge fund managers out of a job faster than Uber drivers.
Well, yeah, I do think we will. I don't like the hedge fund industry or the finance industry. I think there's too many people there. And it's weird how much is duplicated effort. I've been sitting in an office where I knew that the people in the other building that I could see out of my window were doing the exact same thing with the exact same data that I was trying to do. And somehow we're both employed. But we're really just competing against each other in a kind in the market. And there's just a better way to do that. And that's what Numerai is. It's a way to contribute intelligence to the market without this weird adversarial game that is set up where everyone needs to duplicate everyone's efforts. But sorry, what was the? I got on a rampage there against finance.
You'll put hedge fund managers out of a job faster than.
Oh yeah, I do think that it's so much better to have the efficiency of everyone building one thing, and having one open hedge fund attract that talent and that data will mean other hedge funds don't do as well. But that's fine. I think we want to have people lose their jobs if they're not doing anything valuable, because they could go and work for Elon Musk instead of shuffling papers at a hedge fund that's duplicating work we did 3 years ago. So I do want that future. I also don't think, by the way, Uber drivers are going to lose their jobs very soon. So I don't think I think it'll take a long time for us to do this, but it'll be worth it.
That makes sense. I work at H2O.ai, where we're trying to democratize AI, so to speak. And I think that's the promise of democratizing any field. You get a much more valuable end goal or end product.
Exactly.
So the final one is Numerai is like the opposite of universal basic income. I did my homework there.
Numerai is the opposite of universal basic income. Yeah, I mean, this is a popular idea, universal basic income. And in some ways, we're experimenting with it right now all around the world with COVID relief. And you're seeing kind of more violence and problems than ever. So maybe we've already tried the experiment now and it doesn't work. But I said that tweet long before we had the experiment. But ultimately, Numerai is a meritocracy, and so it's the opposite of everyone earns the same amount of money. It's like you earn as much as you risk, and you earn as much as you perform, and there's no other way we're doing it. So it's much more fierce, but also more pure than something like a UBI. And I think a lot of websites or companies are just, their pitch is very, they're trying to pitch something democratic, but it comes out a little bit communist. It's like, we're trying to make everyone the same, and we're trying to make sure everyone is exactly the same. And I don't like that. And I'm happy to have a company that's more pitching to, like, actually, we're looking for a few brilliant people. We don't really believe in the wisdom of crowds. Like for example, I wouldn't think it's a good idea to poll people on the street and ask them what stocks to buy, because that would be crowdsourcing what stocks to buy, right? I think that'll be a terrible idea, and you'd lose money. That's why hedge funds don't do that. But Numerai is more like, what about if one genius out of those 100 people staked a lot of his money on a machine learning model that he had tweaked to be perfectly helpful to our meta model? Like, yeah, that I wanna stake on. So we're not communist.
There's also no barrier as such to contributing to it, just the barrier of staking your tokens.
Yeah.
So final question to you. I can't help draw the analogy. I'm sure you've been asked this before. Elon Musk is from South Africa as well. You're from there as well. Any best advices to people that look up to you both as an inspiration who are trying to build the next thing? Any best meta general advices to such people?
Well, I don't think I'm in the same league as Elon. I'm certainly looking up to him still. And I always remember, first hearing about him, and it really was very inspiring to me because he had gone to America from South Africa, and I probably heard about him when I was like 17, and have tried to do some of the same things that he's done in some way. Like I moved to America as well. I studied in America and started a company as soon as I graduated pretty much. So, but advice to people who look up to, I mean, I do think that there's, I'm not sure. I don't think there's a good blanket rule. I like actually something that Elon Musk says, which is like, if you look at Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, and Steve Jobs, you have three extremely different personalities. And they all were very successful. So it's not really like you need to have some kind of traits or do a certain thing. But anything can work. But I don't know. There's also so much advice to startups and young people, and that is probably more than is needed. But I also would say try to get out of any media narrative in any field. I do get the sense if I meet people who are 20 years old and they want to start an AI company, it's like the only reason is because they've been reading about AI in the news for a few years, and there's no deeper reason that they had this idea. So trying to get out of those things, because what's in the media is nearly the opposite of what is important for you to do 5 years from now. I mean, like even knowing about politics in some way is like that. If you imagine you got really knowledgeable about how to protect yourself from terrorists, and then after 9/11, and then by 2005, you were an expert at defending yourself against terrorist threats. And then, shortly after that, the financial crisis happened, which is what you really should have been thinking about. And you lost your house or something. So there's so much of that going on now too, where there's a lot of stuff where the media is pulling your attention to certain places where it shouldn't be. And I would encourage people I used to read a lot of tech news, maybe from 15 to like 21. And then I think maybe studying math was too hard, and I was reading too many math books or something. And for a few years, I had time away from the media. And I think that was very formative and helpful to be able to have original ideas that sit outside of the system.
That inspires, I hope that inspires 23-year-olds like me from India who didn't listen to anyone, started a podcast. Maybe I'm the only one. And today I met Richard Craib. So that's I hope that means something to someone. You're Richard Craib on Twitter. Would highly encourage people to check out your TikTok account as well. I upgraded my VPN just to access that. They've banned it in India. You have your Medium account as well. Anything that I missed where people can connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. There's not much on the TikTok, but
please put more content.
But yeah, I think Twitter is the best right now, and then also Numerai's Twitter is also good to follow.
Find these links or check out the show notes for them if you're too lazy. Richard, thank you so much again for creating the world's last hedge fund, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review, or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.